Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls, Episode 7, A Dopamine Kick, How to Avoid Getting Obliterated When Chasing 10,000X is the title of this compilation, this four-person compilation from podcasts from Season 6 through 8, 3 podcasts from Season 7, and 1 from Season 8. One of the guests I had in May 2024 came back in December 2024 to help me close out the year. But this episode, will help traders and investors and people who, are chasing that immaculate return and hoping they're not going to get burned. Last time I checked, hope was not a strategy. We need good strategies and sound decision making. And these 4 compilations, these 4 episodes, clips from these 4 podcasts, hopefully will help you as traders and investors. And just overall, the insights, the wisdom that these 4 guests provided are absolutely amazing. So I hope you listen to it. And then the full episodes are available on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, you name it. So we're going to go through the 4 guests quickly before I introduce them all. And they'll introduce themselves in the clips. The first conversation is with Anthony Fernandez, who is the head of business development and sales at ICONOMI. We talked about how to conduct your own digital asset health check and to ensure your crypto investing decisions are sound. And that was from April 2024. The next guest from July 2024 is the founding partner at Stratus. His name is Rennick Palley. And Rennick Palley and I talk about why meme coins can solve the inherent inequities of financial nihilism. What is financial nihilism? Is it something that we should be concerned about? And how do we make decisions that are not going to give us that dopamine kick to get over it real quickly, but that will help us develop patience and make that next right step in our decisions? The third person and Rennick was also July of 2024. The third person was from season 8, November 2024. His name was Zhen Yong. He's the CEO and co-founder of Web3 Auth. And we talked about how to best empower users to manage their non-custodial wallets intuitively. And they have some amazing technology advancements that you're just not going to find at like the Coinbases and the Binances of the world, but will help people who use non-custodial wallets to trade and to invest. So make sure you check that one out. And then the last one, this episode is from May 2024. I spoke to this man again in December 2024, and he is the CEO and co-founder of MatterFi. His name is Michal, Mehow. I'm going to pronounce his last name right, Pospieszalski. We had an amazing conversation, and he talked about how to avoid getting burned while undertaking a digital security revolution. And some people think that we're still in a revolution. Some think we're in a financial evolution. I like to think both. So these 4 clips, check them out. Check out this episode, and I'll see you at the end. Moving into some of the pitfalls about crypto, right? There have been hacks, there have been rugs, there have been money grabs, there have been all kinds of stuff. In addition to really great, utility, tokens and cryptos. So, what do you see as some of the pitfalls of some of these scam-prone cryptos and illiquid investments?
Yeah, when you're looking at these types of investments, like I mentioned, ICONOMI, the way we actually protect our investors is we have a pretty strict asset listing policy. So I can't go into the details too much, but the cryptocurrency token must be listed on multiple major exchanges. So looking at Binance, KuCoin, Coinbase, for example. And before we actually consider listing this token, it must have a minimum market cap or a stable market cap. And it also must have a minimum threshold of a 24-hour trading volume. So essentially what you're doing is you're vetting these tokens to make sure, number one, the market cap is stable. Number two, it's listed on multiple exchanges so that I can potentially sell my token if it gets delisted from one exchange. Number three, it has a minimum 24-hour volume so that I don't get stuck in this token if liquidity does dry up. And I think if you, as an investor, stick to those three kind of principles and watch those as well, that will prevent you going into a lot of these scam tokens because, if you go onto the chart, you see 1,000% X and you're like, yes, I want some of that. But then, liquidity dries up and it's a pump and dump scheme. It's only listed on one exchange. And again, you're stuck holding that losing bag. So try and protect yourself a bit, put in some risk measures for yourself. And that should help you prevent, or that should prevent you going into a lot of these kind of scam tokens and pump and dump schemes as well. But again, that's touching on the meme kind of coin market craze at the moment, which is obviously huge. And yeah, we don't have too much involvement in that particular area.
What are some of the protective measures that you do? I'll tell you one of mine. When I buy a crypto, I put everything in the vault, and the vault has a 48-hour lockup. So if I want to emotionally take my money out, I can't. And then usually what happens is the next morning, I'm like, what was I thinking? You know, that I can't access that. Is there any like protective measures you offer your clients or that you do yourself that help you with the trading and investing?
Yeah, we try to get our investors to automate their investing as much as possible. So they're not emotional about it. So whether they're setting up reoccurring investment plans into their portfolios, whether that's setting up partial stop losses at certain price points and setting up partial take profits at certain price points as well. So if our investor sets up their account correctly, they very rarely need to monitor their portfolio because it's almost automated because they have the portfolio manager managing the investments, and then they have their automated tools either reducing their exposure or increasing their exposure at certain price points. So, when they do see a big spike, they haven't necessarily got to do anything because the system is hopefully taking care of itself.
So, what is financial nihilism, and why was there a recent explosion in it?
Yeah, so those are really two different topics. I'll talk about Roaring Kitty first. So I think and look, GME GameStop is really like the meme stock that he kind of circles around. Look, at the end of the day, every meme is just a community. There's a community around WIF, there's a community around Bonk, there's a community around Pepe, there's a community around GameStop. And so it just so happens that Roaring Kitty is kind of like the Pied Piper of that particular community. And when he came back onto the scene, it drove people to re-engage with the stock. So they're just different mediums for expressing the same sort of cultural community phenomenon that are memes, whether it's a crypto meme or a stock meme, it's the same thing as far as I'm concerned. And then to answer your question about financial nihilism, I think it's a really unfortunate byproduct of many decades of financial and political policy in the US. And that's more or less been exported to other developed nations as well over that time period. And it's essentially the scenario where boomers have benefited disproportionately from money printing and asset price increases over the last few decades. And what that means is people of younger generations, whether it's millennials or Zoomers, basically can't afford to buy those assets from the boomers. Because that when you think about real estate, for example, when you're buying a piece of real estate, you're buying it from someone else. You're not buying a brand new piece of real estate. The land is there. Someone else owned it. You might be buying a new building on top of it. But essentially, you have to buy it from the guy who owned it before you. And if the value has been inflated to the point where the new guy can't afford it, the new generation of people can't afford to buy it from the old generation, then they basically lose hope. And that's financial nihilism. That's basically saying, look, no matter what I do, I'm saving a couple $100 to $1,000 a month at best. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford a $50,000 to $100,000 down payment on a home. I'm just never going to get there. the normal way, right? I can't just keep putting this money away in the S&P 500, making 7% per year, hoping that I'm going to be able to, have financial freedom at some point. The way that it worked for the older generations is not really the way it's going to work for the current generations. And so they look at that and say, well, what's my alternative? I can go hyper gamble on memes and maybe turn that $1,000 into $100,000 and actually change my life in a few months. So I think, that's probably the best way I can sum it up. I have some thoughts on what the downstream ramifications of that are, but hopefully that's a helpful definition.
I really want to know about this downstream ramifications because I have some ideas too. And I want to see if we're aligned on that. Money printing did mask the money printing that happened right when COVID happened, masked boomers' inability to leave their companies, and it gave them money. And so instead of exposing their failures, it bailed them out. It was the second time they got bailed out. 2008, 2020. So I'm really interested to find out what you think the downstream effects are.
Yeah, and I think it's on the corporate level, but it's also just every person who owns assets, whether they own stocks or they own real estate, benefited from the money printing. Because when you print dollars versus a scarce asset, the scarce asset is going to increase in dollar terms, even if there is no actual earnings power increase associated with it. It's the same thing, same reason why we've seen Bitcoin perform so well over the last 10 years. It's all the same idea. It's just how do you want to express your view that money is going to keep getting printed? Now, the problem is it's been happening for decades. And so boomers got rich off of it. And so the question is, well, how does this play out? Like, where does this end? What does the future look like?
Why is it important to make digital ownership and identity human-centric?
So, in particular, I think human-centric, what you just stated is kind of like our mission, right? So first off, crypto has so many benefits, and us in the crypto space feel that, and the benefits start from, like the ability to self-custody digital assets, to own your own footprint, your own assets, your own data, to all the way to like more concepts like access to liquidity markets, right? Access to instruments that people not in the US may not typically have access to. It also includes the ability to do remittance, to do payments, to not be beholden to centralized payment networks and credit card providers and so on and so forth. And it's a great alternative to existing financial systems today. Now, those benefits are fantastic, right? But there is a barrier to the next billion users really hopping onto crypto. And that barrier, ultimately, at the end of the day, is a mixture of, first off, use case and need, right? Like, the use case and need needs to be 10 times more attractive than what's existing today, right? For somebody usually to go, okay, I want to make it. So I can't just be a bit better. I would say that today, crypto is already a bit better than current payment networks, because like payment networks just charge businesses, what, 3 to 5% for every fucking transaction that you do, right? And that's an insane amount if you think about it. Whereas in crypto today, on like L2s or on Solana or on cheaper networks, you are paying well less than 5%, right? So I already think that it is more efficient than existing payment networks today. But is it 10x better? That's in certain cases perhaps, but in certain cases not yet. And we need to get to the point where use cases are 10x better, such that people want to swap. Next is all of the infrastructure and all underlying that adds that use case needs to be, naturally, for something to be 10x better, part of that is a fantastic user experience. It is something that is intuitive to the end user. It's like, like I might have a product that's 10x better, but I have to, like, I don't know, spend a week to learn it before I can use it, relative to something that's and and that just basically reduces its value because I have to spend a week to actually try to do it, relative to something that maybe is like 5x better, but I can do it instantly and get that instant gratification and feeling of trying it out. It can go viral, blah blah blah, so on and so forth, and that actually makes it a 10x better product at the end of the day. So I think being human centric is basically thinking about end user. It's thinking about the security, thinking about the experience, the seamlessness of it, and really tailoring the wallet and key management experiences and the crypto experiences to what these individuals need.
But for the average users who just are used to typing in a password today, what options are going to be available for them going forward, and why are they better?
Well, so the problem with username and password is there is a database of the hash of your password sitting at the server you're trying to log into, right? So, and generally there is a cache of the password sitting in the memory of the devices that you're on, right? So like, for example, your phone has a cache of all your passwords, your computer has a cache of your passwords in Safari. So people are very used to these things, right? And ultimately, like, okay, so let's talk about that hash. What is the hash? And I'm not, that's as technical as I'm going to get, but I think people should understand this. So like, say I save a password like Smurf Neblin, right? Now that password is not going to be stored as Smurf Neblin in plain text on the server, right? What the server does is it's going to, when I register for that password, it's going to hash it, meaning there's a one-way transformation that takes that into a unique string, usually of 256 bits. Right. And whatever the string is, it can be as long as a book, or it can be as short as a single word or even a letter or whatever. When you hash it, you're always going to get the same hash. So if you hash A one time, you're going to get hash X. If you hash A again, you're going to get hash X again. Now, if I type in the characters A and B, I'm now going to get a completely different hash. So what happens is username and passwords are all stored this way, right? At least the passwords are for sure. And if somebody guesses your password, then they know the hash, right? And so there's these entire huge databases out on the dark web of like, these are all the known passwords. In fact, there's services where you can look up like which of your password hashes have already been stolen, right? And so that makes it so if you use the same password everywhere, the second one gets compromised on one website, then now everybody knows what it is on every other website. And the reason they know that is like, okay, if we know that AB is this hash and that's been hacked on this website, we know both AB and the hash. And now we see that hash like 30 other websites. We know you've been using the same password in 30 other websites. So little things that people don't understand about passwords. This is why people are always like, use a new password on every website, right? So then naturally you have this giant nightmare of keeping track of all this stuff. Like I use a password encryptor called Password Safe, which is open source, very good piece of software. And I also cache in my Safari just because it's convenient and also secure. And but the reason we have all these passwords is because of all these vulnerabilities, right, associated with passwords. And then you're always like, oh, I forgot my password. Now I got to reset it, right? So, and people think this is the only way, right? Because this is how it's been working since the dawn of computing technology. We're like, well, how are we going to secure all this stuff? Well, let's use username and passwords, right? And people think, okay, well, we're just going to be stuck with this forever, right? And really, that doesn't make any sense because there's way better ways to do it. And so what we're suggesting is that just like in like MetaMask, there's no username and password. There's your private key is essentially stored on a hardware device or locally on your machine. The server has no copy of it. It doesn't have a copy of the hash. It doesn't have any of these things I'm talking about. You just sign with your private key. And ultimately, at that point, the security model changes from managing this sort of server and client relationship between usernames and passwords to just keeping your private key secure, which you can do easily a bunch of different ways. You can secure it with biometrics, you can secure it with a PIN, right? You can do things like some other wallets are doing in terms of doing like a multi-party computation around that. So that just changes the security model. And the way it works is you can now, if you're doing that, there is no reason to just use that private key just for crypto transactions.
Everybody, that was the 7th episode of the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. All of my episodes from season 6 through 8 will be in compilations. And I estimate we're going to have about 67 of them at the end of the day. How long it takes me, I'm not quite sure yet, but these episodes will all be found on Spotify and Apple and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, really. And yeah, this was the 7th episode. And I hope everybody tunes in for the rest of the compilation, and we'll see you soon.